We've spent weeks, no, months, building up to tonight. It's the Boogie Man Jam 84. Thanks for tuning in to Tyler Vance Rants. I am your host, Tyler Vance himself. It's March 17th, 1984. Last week, Dirty Dick Slater was screwed out of the NWA Television Championship during the finals of the championship tournament against Mark Youngblood. Roddy Piper and Tony Garea continued their verbal war with each other while Paul Jones prepared for his upcoming confrontation with Jimmy Valiant. We'll get to that confrontation in just a moment. First this week we're going to be tuning into WWF Championship Wrestling, where first on the cards we have SD Jones and Steve Lombardi preparing to take on the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, who have their manager Captain Lou Albano accompanying them. Not only are the Samoans brutal in the ring, but they're just frightening in general. Vince McMahon and Gene Okerlund are once again on commentary this evening as they call the match, and when you're up against the Wild Samoans, you do have to have a level of physicality and toughness about you. Not every person can boast that they have that level. SD Jones, however, can. Steve Lombardi? Not so much. I guess the fans are just so offended with the Wild Samoans that a certain fan in particular decides to throw an apple and waste precious food with his distaste towards the Samoans. Unfortunately for that fan, however, his efforts and food go to waste since Afa gets the Wild Samoan drop on Steve Lombardi to get the win. Angelo Gomez takes on Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff next in singles competition, and Mr. Wonderful is accompanied to the ring by his manager, Roddy Piper. Orndorff is all over Gomez as soon as the match starts, basically taking his opponent's head off with a clothesline. Orndorff's wonderful pile driver is delivered shortly thereafter, and he puts Gomez away for the win.
This week our update concerns an American cult hero.
Whoa, hey, Vince, look, you're kind of infringing on my territory here. What, just because you're a billionaire so you can afford a better studio?
Move over, Dwight David Eisenhower. General Patton couldn't hold a candle to this man, Sergeant Slaughter.
Move over General Patton and MacArthur? Are you kidding me? What Vince is trying to explain to us is that the war between the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter is still red hot, despite the setbacks that the Marine has encountered recently. The two are going to be having a rematch soon. Well, I shouldn't call it a rematch, but their official match will be started soon, because if you remember their last encounter, the Iron Sheik's assault was so vicious on the Marine, Sergeant Slaughter, that the match never even got started. I personally cannot wait to see that warmonger, Sergeant Slaughter, get the final nail put in his coffin. Next up, we have a match between children, literal children, brought to you by Bob Backlund. The former WWF World Heavyweight Champion has trained these two kids, Paul and Ken, and they're going to be demonstrating what they've learned in amateur wrestling to an international television audience. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, these kids obviously know what they're doing, but why are we watching this? It doesn't help the fact that myself and the crowd, for the most part, don't really understand the rules of amateur wrestling. McMahon and Okerlund keep making reference to points, and the match is restarted several times without any kind of explanation. What is going on here? In the end, the boys draw 4-4, and personally I think that's a ripoff. Send them back in there until we get a winner. Gene Okerlund leaves the commentary booth and heads down ringside to get a word with the former WWF World Heavyweight Champion Bob Backlund himself. Bob Backlund says that he is incredibly proud of both Paul and Ken, and awards them with a celebratory plaque as well as new trunks to train in. Awesome. Stop the pain. Okerlund then asks Backlund a direct question. Is the Boy Scout 100% ready to return back to the ring? Backlund starts being really cryptic, avoiding the question, talking about how he found out who his real friends were and who he could really trust while he was recovering from his injury. I was never his friend, so I know I'm not included in that statement. Then finally, Backlund answers the question.
And just to prove that I'm at 100%, I'm going to be wrestling right here next week. It's good to have you back.
Speak for yourself. Charlie Fulton and Tony Russo take on the Invaders next in a tag team match. Surprisingly, all the competitors in this match seem to be asleep. They're all uncharacteristically slow, especially the Invaders, who are known for their high electricity and entertaining style of wrestling. I can't believe that Bob Backlund brought the mood down that low. After a senton bomb on Fulton, the Invaders pull a switcheroo and get the win. This week's edition of Piper's Pit is massive. Andre the Giant Massive. At first, Andre refuses to answer any of Roddy Piper's questions, but then finally does so, responding to where he hails from with,
"None of your business."
"Look, Mr. the Giant, and I do mean this with all absolute utmost respect. When you agree to go on to an interview talk show, it's expected that you actually, answer some questions." At this point, Piper gets a little ticked off and asks Andre
If the questions are too hard for you, I will try to bring them down a little. Big body, little tiny weeny brain.
The topic of Big John Studd comes up, and Piper asks Andre the Giant directly, was Big John Studd ever able to successfully slam Andre? Of course, Andre the Giant denies this. It really doesn't matter if Big John Studd was successful one way or the other, considering the fact that Roddy Piper lays out his own challenge, saying that if given 5 minutes, he would be able to slam Andre. And you know what? I'll take that bet. I bet Piper could do it. Andre clearly has never heard of talk show etiquette before, because after that, he then begins to scuffle with Piper, ripping the Scotsman's shirt off. Piper loses his mind, and he lays out a challenge. He wants Andre in a match. Tony Garea takes on Greg the Hammer Valentine in the next singles match, and it won't be the only time that we see Greg Valentine tonight. Accompanied by his manager, Captain Lou Albano, Valentine easily out-wrestles Garea. The Hammer can easily match power with technicality on the fly. However, Garea does get a close call following a sunset flip. Not only did Garea try to out-wrestle the Hammer at the beginning of the match, but now he's trying to overpower him as well. All he ends up doing, though, is embarrassing himself by missing a flying crossbody. After that, Valentine simply drops an elbow and seals the deal. Garea, you suck. The next match is an incredibly quick one, as Butcher Vachon jumps on his opponent Frank Ruiz's chest for the 1-2-3. Finally, the main event of WWF Championship Wrestling sees Ron Shaw take on Mr. Italy himself, Salvatore Bellomo. Shaw manages to take it to Bellomo at the beginning of the match, but unfortunately his offense does not last very long. Bellomo then tries to bring Shaw down to the mat following a mixture of suplexes and a dropkick. He almost gets a near fall, but Ron Shaw gets his foot on the rope, and it's good to see a losing wrestler learn some new tricks. The pair seem to be evenly matched, and interpret that however you will. It does go back and forth for a little bit longer before culminating in Salvatore Bellomo getting a crossbody win. The anticipation has been growing inside me since I opened the show with it, but it's finally time to tune into Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and the Boogie Man Jam 84. Since this is a special event, it's not conducted like a regular episode. For example, there's absolutely no commentary whatsoever. No interviews either, just pure wrestling. And if you're like me, that's some exciting news. We'll get to see what everybody's made of with zero distractions. Up first is Tully Blanchard taking on Dory Funk Jr. Accompanying Tully is his manager, Paul Jones, who we will be seeing quite a lot of tonight. If you remember, Paul Jones had some stipulations for his appearance here tonight. First and foremost, in the main event against Jimmy Valiant, while one of the assassins takes him on, Paul Jones will be locked inside of a steel cage at ringside. In return, Paul Jones requested that no fan bring any distracting signs to the event tonight, and for once, it seems like the NWA lived up to their end of the bargain. In return, however, the fans do get their venom out by absolutely booing Paul Jones out of the building. Blanchard starts the match off really cocky, and unfortunately it costs him some mistakes. Funk Jr.'s experience is just a little too much for Blanchard to overcome at first, and it's not long before Tully starts getting frustrated. Thankfully, Paul Jones is nearby to keep his client from boiling over. Dory Funk Jr. does manage to control the first half of the match, but along with his youth, Tully Blanchard also has a heavy dose of tenacity, which refuses to allow him to quit. Funk Jr. realizes this and brings the match down to the mat, trying to wear Blanchard down. At this point, a stalemate occurs, and it hits me. We are watching the past meet the future of technical wrestling. If Tully Blanchard can secure a win tonight, he very well may be the next Dory Funk Jr. Funk Jr. rolls Blanchard into a reverse roll-up pin, but only gets reversed back into the same old position. On Paul Jones's advice, Tully Blanchard secures a firm grip on Dory Funk Jr.'s tights, gaining some leverage. This allows him to score the very first win for Paul Jones's army. Next up sees the Big Cat Ernie Ladd answer a $1,000 challenge from Rufus R. Jones. You see, Rufus R. Jones has a huge issue with Ernie Ladd, and he offered up the $1,000 of his own money just to simply face the Big Cat in the ring, and it seems that the almighty greenback caught the cat's attention. Once the bell rings, Rufus R. Jones's bones turn into liquid, and it seems like he loses control of his entire body. Opposite him, Ladd is so lumbering and slow, it's surprising that he's able to hit Jones at all. But then again, Jones is too busy flailing out of control in his corner to focus on wrestling at this point. I can understand why the Big Cat isn't really putting on his best show. I mean, he's getting $1,000 whether he wins or loses here tonight, so it's no skin off his back. Despite his lackluster attitude, Big Cat has brought insurance just in case. While getting his head bashed into the corner by Jones, the Big Cat slides something into his thumb's tape and then uppercuts Jones in the throat, getting an advantage. It's at this point that Ernie Ladd proves that not only is he big, but he's dumb too, because he doesn't even go for the pin. Instead, he goes up to the top rope and misses a headbutt, leading to Jones getting the win. Ladd is so delirious after this that he thinks he's won the match, raising his arm in victory to a chorus of boos from the crowd. At least you got $1,000 out of it, you mangy cat. Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood are the new NWA World Tag Team Champions, and they're set to face off against the former World Tag Team Champions, Don Kernodle and Bob Orton Jr. The former champions have brought their manager Gary Hart along to ensure that no funny business occurs. If you think to yourself, wait a second, weren't Bob Orton Jr. and Don Kernodle the NWA World Tag Team Champions literally on last week's episode? Yes. However, on March 4th, in an untelevised event, Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood usurped the champions, and it is only now officially being recognized on television. You'd think that Chief McDaniel and Mark Youngblood would want to prove to the crowd that they are fighting champions, but instead, nope, no dice. Cowards. They probably won't put the championships on the line ever because they know that their win was a fluke and they'd lose it back like that. When the match gets going, Mark Youngblood just proves again how much that he sucks, because when he's opposite Don Kernodle, all he does is back up into his corner and tag in Chief Wahoo McDaniel. How is this kid both a World Tag Team Champion and a television champion? Kernodle manages to bait the Chief into his own corner and then double teams him along with his partner Bob Orton Jr. before sending the champion outside the ring. The referee was so quick to count out Don Kernodle a few moments ago when he was outside of the ring. But Chief Wahoo McDaniel, he gets a pass. Take as much time as you need, champ. Favoritism shines again in the NWA referees. Youngblood tags into the match after Bob Orton Jr. has spent a significant amount of time in the ring for his team, so Youngblood, sensing that Orton Jr. is weak and vulnerable, takes advantage like a coward. However, all Mark Youngblood manages to do, despite Orton Jr.'s weakened and winded state, is punch Bob a couple of times before putting him in a headlock. Wow, Mark, you're doing so good. Finally, the former World Tag Team Champions get their act together and stomp the ever-loving hell out of Mark Youngblood. And then it's not long before we see Mark Youngblood in that familiar position of being sprawled out on the mat. When Youngblood is sent outside the ring, once again the referee does not even begin to consider counting the World Tag Team Champion out. This match is rigged, so Orton Jr. heads outside of the ring to take the match to Mark Youngblood. And then of course, that's when the referee starts his count. Once the match gets back into the ring, Mark Youngblood is practically useless, and all Chief Wahoo McDaniel can do is watch helplessly from his corner as his partner practically gets beaten to death. By some miracle, Chief McDaniel is eventually able to get himself back into the match through a tag and goes on an absolute rampage. He knocks Don Kernodle down, and then tags his younger partner Youngblood back into the match so that he can drop an axe handle on Kernodle and score the win. This is bullshit. It's okay, I'm calm, I'm cool. Let's move on to the next match, which is a 6-man tag team match with the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff, the Great Kabuki, and Gary Hart himself against Junkyard Dog, King Kong, Angelo Mosca Sr., and his son, the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, Angelo Mosca Jr. The Great Kabuki starts things off for his team, but he ends up getting caught by Angelo Mosca Jr. That prompts Gary Hart to hop into the ring for his client's aid. Only he falls down and retreats to his own corner when King Kong Angelo Mosca Sr. enters the ring illegally. Referee, do something! The Great Kabuki continues to struggle against Angelo Mosca Jr., but eventually does manage to trap the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion in enemy territory. The match really gets going when Junkyard Dog gets in the ring opposite of Ivan Koloff, who proves to be tougher than a $2 steak. Junkyard Dog can't quite put the Russian Bear out of his misery, so he tags in King Kong. Instead of going on a tear like his nickname would suggest, all Angelo Mosca Sr. ends up doing for his team is becoming a liability. Remember, the Great Kabuki recently spit his poison mist into Angelo Mosca Sr.'s eyes, resulting in the Senior Mosca losing 20% of his vision. Well, the Great Kabuki didn't forget. This signals the rest of the team to do everything in their power to focus on Angelo Mosca Sr.'s eyes, poking, prodding, hitting, whatever they can. Angelo Mosca Jr. comes to his father's aid and gets a lucky crossbody on Gary Hart to secure the win for his team. To make matters worse, the winning team then ends up attacking the losers, and this is what the crowd cheers for. Months of bad blood are about to come to a head in this steel cage match for the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. Dirty Dick Slater puts his championship on the line against his one-time friend, Greg the Hammer Valentine. See, I told you we hadn't seen the last of Greg. Once inside the cage, Slater kicks at the door to make sure that it's secured properly and then inspects the frame of the cage, only to dash for the exit. Go, Slater, go! Unfortunately, Valentine manages to catch Slater and drags him back into the center of the ring, where the two begin to absolutely wail on each other. This one, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be violent. The Hammer manages to slow the match down following a series of blows and moves on the champion, bringing the match down to the mat for a time. Greg Valentine then transitions to a chin lock before the champion is able to get free, and Slater and Valentine then proceed to just simply wail on each other again. The Hammer lives up to his nickname and comes out the victor of their fist fight. It doesn't take long before one of the competitors meets the cage up close and personal, and that honor goes to Greg Valentine, who winds up with a crimson mask. With Valentine bleeding, Slater then begins to focus all of his efforts on the cut, hoping to eliminate the Hammer from the match. Valentine manages a brief comeback, However, an elbow to the gushing wound by Slater almost wins the match for the champion. Slater ends up getting caught by an elbow of his own, and the challenger then turns on beast mode. He goes absolutely crazy, punching and throwing Slater all over the cage. It isn't long before both men are now bleeding. The referee actually has to literally put himself in between the two to prevent Greg Valentine from killing Dick Slater. The champion, unfortunately, is at the challenger's mercy at this point. Both men have taken each other to the absolute limit, and the Hammer tries to go for a diving elbow from the second rope. However, he misses, which leads to Dick Slater getting a pile driver. When the referee begins to count, Greg Valentine still has enough cognition to lift his leg up onto the rope, causing a break. I pose a serious question to you, the viewers, at this point. The steel cage match is supposed to be a no disqualification match. Do you think that rope breaks should be allowed in this kind of an environment? For me personally, I don't think that rope breaks should be acknowledged. Either way, let me know what your stance is down in the comments. Regardless of my thoughts, the match is allowed to continue, and the NWA United States Heavyweight Champion seems at an absolute loss on how to put the challenger, Greg the Hammer Valentine, away for good. Slater resorts to a high-risk move from the top rope, and the thing about high-risk moves is that they are high risk, and Slater does end up getting caught by Valentine, leading to the champion being placed in the challenger's figure 4 leg lock. Or he tries to. You see, Greg Valentine spends so much time pandering to the crowd that it gives Dick Slater enough time to kick the challenger into the side of the steel cage. After that, all Slater has to do is roll the challenger up, and 1, 2, 3, that's all she wrote. Dirty Dick Slater is still yours and my NWA United States Heavyweight Champion. Greg Valentine whines and cries to the referee about this, and all I have to say is, why don't you head back to the WWF and tell Vince McMahon all about it, Hammer? It is time for the main event of the evening. Jimmy Valiant places the rest of his hair on the line against one of Paul Jones's assassins. The assassin in question is assassin number 2. Valiant, you're done. It seems, however, as the match is beginning to get underway, that some of the stipulations agreed to by Paul Jones have changed. First and foremost, Mr. Jones no longer has to be locked inside of a steel cage at ringside. Instead, he will be attached to the American Dream Dusty Rhodes via bull rope, cowbell included. I'm seeing this as a win. Did the NWA honestly think that it was acceptable to put a man of Paul Jones's reputation and character in a steel cage like some common crook? Before the match gets underway, officially, the ring announcer reads off a special message from Jim Crockett Jr. And since Jim Crockett Jr. is too much of a coward to come down to the ring and say what he wants to say himself, the poor ring announcer is left to be the sacrificial lamb.
Will the assassin who is not wrestling be escorted from ringside?
The blatant corruption comes straight from the top in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. No wonder referees get away with murder while Jim Crockett Jr. pulls stunts like this. It takes 4 NWA suits to escort Assassin 1 to the backstage area. That's a bit much, don't you think, Jim? With Dusty Rhodes keeping a close eye on Paul Jones, the match begins. Jimmy Valiant has apparently been given the green light to do exactly as he pleases, as he immediately starts the match by hitting Assassin number 2 and going to work on him with a steel chair. I guess we're throwing this out the window again tonight. Valiant's offense is just so lackluster. He throws so many punches that I honestly lost count. Wrestling, Jimmy. It's what you do. Assassin number 2 manages to even the odds in this sham of a match by sliding a metal plate into his mask and headbutting the Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, opening him up from ear to ear. At this point, things look very bleak for Valiant. So Dusty Rhodes jumps in to help his friend out. Unfortunately, Paul Jones is no longer an active wrestler, and he's in no position to stop the actions of the American Dream, which include sending Assassin number 2 to Dreamland after Dusty Rhodes hits him over the head with the cowbell. Jimmy Valiant secures the win. And by all rights, that means he gets to unmask Assassin number 2. As disrespectful as this is, Assassin number 2 did agree to this stipulation, so let's see what he looks like. He looks like a regular dude. Are you happy, Valiant? Paul Jones is the one who gets the last laugh, as he managed to get a hold of the cowbell that Dusty Rhodes used against Assassin number 2, smashing it right into the back of Jimmy Valiant's head as the night comes to an end. And one final note to round out the week. At the behest of Jim Crockett Jr., Ricky Steamboat came out of retirement to face the Nature Boy Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. While footage of this match is rare, it did see Steamboat come up just a little bit short in his efforts. Maybe there will be a rematch one day soon. Where to begin? In WWF Championship Wrestling, Roddy Piper made a huge enemy in Andre the Giant. Vince McMahon also ripped off me, Tyler Vance, and we saw the semi-return of Bob Backlund. In Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, it was the Boogie Man Jam 84, and it was jam-packed with action. The new NWA World Tag Team Champions, Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood, were too scared to put their championships on the line against the former World Tag Team Champions, Don Kernodle and Bob Orton Jr. Greg the Hammer Valentine came very close to winning the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, but however lost to longtime rival Dirty Dick Slater. And finally, Assassin 2 was unmasked by Jimmy Valiant. When does it end with Jimmy Valiant? The man seemingly is given a free pass to do as he pleases in the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling area. Sometimes he literally commits attempted murder, the rules don't seem to apply to him when he's in a match, and the man just won't quit. Maybe it's in his blood. Maybe he can't help it. I mean, I do call him the Boogie Woogie Maniac for a reason. Jimmy Valiant is insane, but the Boogie Man Jam was brilliant. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Tyler Vance Rants. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, hit the bell so you're always reminded when a new one is posted, and subscribe so you never miss a beat. Follow me on social media, and I'll see you next week. So long for now. He is ready to return. Piper is capable and confident that it's like, hey, I'm a bad guy. After that, Valentine Tully Funk Jr. Sr. If Tully Blanchard can Jones his bot to face NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy, what the hell?